councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists.
Of a secret government directed principally by NSC staffers accountable to not a single elected official, including apparently the President himself. A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
One sunny afternoon, Nikola Tesla was in his Houston Street laboratory in Manhattan. He was experimenting with oscillators, which are electronic devices used to emit sound waves and even vibrations. He attached the little device to a support beam in his lab that ran the length of the building. He switched it on and started to gradually adjust the frequency it was emitting until, bingo, the beam started to vibrate. He had found the resonant frequency of the column. The test was proving to be a success. He started to feel a vibration in the floor as the sound wave traveled down the length of the beam and spread under his feet. He increased the intensity on the knob. It was just a quiver, but his downstairs neighbor began to notice his ceiling shaking. The other neighbors thought it was a heavy truck banging down the street, but the shaking persisted and grew stronger and stronger. The vibration spread across the entire floor of the laboratory and into the neighboring buildings. Some of the locals in Little Italy and Chinatown began spilling onto the streets, thinking an earthquake was happening. The trembling was incessant and horrific, causing windows to shatter, pipes to stretch. The local police on Mulberry Street, they felt it too. An earthquake in New York City? Impossible. The police station was right around the corner from Tesla's lab, and they were all too familiar with the strange lights and sounds which would happen throughout the day and night from that building. As the ground shook, furniture was moving, pipes were breaking, and the officers thought the police headquarters was about to collapse. 2 police rushed out the door toward Tesla's lab. They reached his building. The vibrations felt even stronger there. They ran up the stairwell, facing the fear that the building might collapse on them. As they burst through the door to Tesla's lab, they were met with a bizarre sight. Tesla, swinging a heavy sledgehammer at one of the iron beams, he smashed the little device off, and the vibrations instantly stopped. No more earthquake. Tesla was surprised to see the 2 uniformed police officers just staring at him in shock. He approached them with the sledgehammer still in his hands and said, "Good day, gentlemen." Apparently, Tesla was completely oblivious to the near destruction he had caused in the neighboring buildings and the neighborhood. The police were, I'm sure, as dumbfounded as the rest of the neighborhood. Everyone at that time knew who Tesla was. He was routinely in the New York papers. You can actually look up the digitized papers from early 1900s New York City and find dozens and dozens of newspaper articles interviewing Tesla about lightning or electricity or reporting on his new experiments. He was an odd but welcome fixture of the modern industrial age.
In 1934, after a lifetime of scientific discovery, Serbian-American Nikola Tesla announces his invention of a revolutionary particle beam weapon, the death ray.
Tesla was making very substantial claims about so-called teleforce rays that could bring down airplanes from thousands of miles away.
So powerful is the death ray, it could create an impenetrable shield around any nation possessing it, making war obsolete. His announcement raises headlines around the world, and in 1935, the concept secures a ready buyer, not in his adopted home, America, but in its emerging rival, the Soviet Union.
The Soviets gave him $25,000 for some preliminary details regarding the particle beam weapon.
The deal for the death ray concept is done in secret, but Tesla suspects he's being spied upon, and soon after, he's involved in a suspicious accident.
He was hit by a taxi, and was it coincidence or not? It is possible that someone tried to assassinate, you know. He was followed at that time by the FBI, and he gave his project to the Soviet Union. So maybe for some people it seems very dangerous what he was doing, and he maybe someone wanted to eliminate him. Yeah, it's possible.
But Nikola Tesla survives, and in 1939, predictions of another war come true as Nazi Germany invades Poland. With World War II raging in 1943, from his home in a New York hotel, Tesla contacts a U.S. military general to ask for a meeting. He wants to share the secret of his death ray to help end the war.
Tesla was trying to involve the United States government and then any other government who would listen to him.
But the inventor never makes it to that meeting. Within days, on January 8, 1943, Nikola Tesla is found dead in his Manhattan hotel room.
He was a recluse, living alone in 2 rooms of the Hotel New Yorker.
The timing of his death is suspicious, and so is the fact that his hotel safe is ransacked and personal papers taken. Has iconic genius Nikola Tesla been killed to gain access to the deadly secret of his death ray? For decades, rumors and conspiracy theories swirl.
There are some theories that suggest that Tesla might have been killed over his invention of the particle weapon. And certainly there are a lot of people who suggest that Tesla's papers and notes for a particle beam weapon were stolen so that nefarious governments could work on them.
And as we extend the rule of law on earth, so must we also extend it to man's new domain, outer space. All of us salute the brave cosmonauts of the Soviet Union. The new horizons of outer space must not be riven by the old bitter concepts of imperialism and sovereign claims. The cold reaches of the universe must not become the new arena of an even colder war. To this end, we shall urge proposals extending the United Nations Charter to the limits of man's exploration in the universe, reserving outer space for peaceful use, prohibiting weapons of mass destruction in space or on celestial bodies, and opening the mysteries and benefits of space to every nation. We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control. We shall propose, finally, a global systems of communication satellites linking the whole world in telegraph and telephone and radio and television. The day need not be far away when such a system will televise the proceedings of this body to every corner of the world for the benefit of peace.
no investigations today that have determined a cause. Another thing is, where's the debris? If these were hurricane-force winds, why is everything, everywhere, just the streets are pristine? You drive down, there's just ash. Hurricane-force winds would blow so many things over. The only thing I've ever seen overturned in this is cars, and they have holes in them.
Survivors of the Maui fire say that they received no warning and that the flames appeared so quickly that escape was difficult. Everything was suddenly in flames, and many found refuge in the ocean for hours while their homes burned to the ground and into the same powdery ash footprint we've seen in recent years. So far, it is estimated that nearly 1,000 people have died. Locals are worried this includes hundreds of children who were home due to school being canceled that day. Several people are reporting that the government is not only doing little to help, but they are blocking local efforts to do so and are not allowing local donations through, and that they are blocking life-saving medicine because it isn't federally approved.
Denying people access to bring in supplies, just supplies for people to live.
The government withholding every single one of our donations because we are not a part of FEMA and Red Cross. So none of this is eligible for giving out. Tell me why. I have no freaking clue.
The people of Maui are on their own for now, and aside from the federal government's bureaucratic failure, they have good reason to be suspicious. Just like what we saw 5 years ago in Paradise, California, there was nothing normal about these fires. Within a day of burning, it was like a bomb went off.
When you see the full extent of the destruction of Lahaina, it will shock you. It does appear like a bomb and fire went off, if I may. And all of those buildings virtually are going to have to be rebuilt.
What happened in Maui the other day on 8/8/2023 was in fact a direct attack on the people of Maui, and that these fires are far from natural, far from normal, and that it was in fact caused by directed energy weapons, and spread awareness that this really is a serious thing that is occurring. It has happened in the past. If you guys remember 9/11, there was a 110-story building that completely collapsed and turned into dust leaving a rubble pile less than 2 stories high, which is absolutely impossible unless those buildings were completely dustified using scalar wave technology, which is also what we call directed energy weapons.
That's crazy!
What we're being told on the news is not what's actually happening. I feel like from every angle, the government is doing everything they can to shut down all grassroots efforts and all of the locals' efforts to assist in any way, shape, or form, coming up with all these excuses why we can't help. And people in the community are coming together. They're amazing here. They love their neighbors. They're doing everything they can. And then it's red tape, red tape, red tape. All this bureaucracy going on, all of these other ulterior motives. Everybody's worried about, the government's worried about getting FEMA funding. And also be on alert. If you sign your property over to FEMA, you may never get it back.
So we want to talk about a few things that are missing from the equation of the Hawaiian fire. They're saying that this is climate change. But this lady was talking about how they shut off the water so that people couldn't put out the fires. Also, she mentioned that all the children were home that day because school was canceled. Then we go to this guy's video, and he was talking about how people were trying to escape the city and are being turned around by the police officers just due to the power lines that were in the road. So they forcefully told the people to go back into the fires. Now, what's also weird about this whole situation is that this book came out yesterday, Fire and Fury, the story of the 2023 Maui fire and its implications for climate change. So you forced the people back into the town while it was burning, turned off the water, altered the weather with geoengineering, and then called it climate change.
They are not telling us the truth of what's going on at all.
Steel frame foundations, only a foot off the ground, were all completely warped, bent, and mangled. Every car and truck was completely torched. Every single rubber tire was burned into oblivion, and all that remained was the steel belt system from within. The temperatures were hot enough to melt aluminum. They were hot enough to melt glass. And they were hot enough to decimate every single last thing inside the home, which makes these fires at least 3 times hotter than your average house fire. And yet some things were inexplicably untouched by the super intense heat. Pristine carports with torched automobiles beneath them, next to homes completely burned to ash. Plastic trash cans untouched. The firemen observed that plastics attached to metal completely melted, while plastics by themselves seemed to somehow survive what must have been extraordinary heat. They found an isolated, unattached electrical generator that was completely burned out, like the cars, but the surrounding area was untouched. They discovered a smart meter inside of an enclosed box that completely burned out from its own wiring. They suspect that it could have been the start of some of these fires. Other investigators are observing how guardrails have caught fire where the metal bolts connect to the wood. And many are wondering what type of fire ignites metals while sparing plastic and surrounding trees. Microwaves ignite metal. And 4 years ago, the U.S. Navy demonstrated a directed energy weapon by burning a hole in a truck and destroying a moving target at sea. According to naval research, the weapon system performs flawlessly and is capable of destroying its target with pinpoint accuracy. The mountains surrounding the Paradise fires are riddled with anomalous scars, as if a laser beam scorched swaths of forest while leaving the rest untouched. It is indeed a terribly sordid mystery, and nothing comes but silence from official sources.
People are saying that it was directed energy weapons. We know that most major governments already have them, and during the California fires, online weather maps recorded what looks like a laser from above, striking an area just before it bursts into flames. In his research, Dennis Mills discovered that the incendiary aluminum and barium nanodust from chemtrails is most likely fueling the ferocity of today's so-called super wildfires.
This is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net. I say that because there is a very significant YouTube there on Stop the Crime. And one of the reasons why I was not here for 2.5 years, I used to be a regular attendee here. But Pacific Gas and Electric was intercepted with a download of documents professing the fact that they were going to be using directed energy weapons satellite-based on Sonoma County. That has been up on YouTube with a plan to burn up Northern California. We discovered that Pacific Gas and Electric is operated by and large by Rothschild. Rothschild owns Weather Central and also has a large hand in weather modification globally.
Consequently, in the interest of future world order, peace, and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social energy, wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible, many in the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, and worthy few. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create, secure, and apply new weapons which, as it turned out, were a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn for themselves the name silent weapons.
Today there's a great deal of work on directed energy weapons, and it involves billions and billions of dollars. It involves lasers, particle beam weapons, a variety of different types of directed energy technology.
Components of microwave system. Look at the RF source, magnetron. It requires a magnetron. So it must work in the same way on a large scale as a microwave does on a small scale. See the hole it created in the car? And then the fire is still burning? It's the same kind of fires we saw in that John Hutchinson video with the boat in the water. It's not a natural occurrence, not a natural fire. It's being created. Look at this next video. You see how it's like a storm being created, where inside this specific area there's high winds. Outside of it, there's no wind at all. So this one's in Australia as well. See the high winds, the trees, but then in the foreground over here, the yellow grass, it's not moving at all. There's no wind there.
You'll receive a copy of my proposed recommendation and can attend that board meeting and present your information directly to them. With regard to this proceeding, basically there are 4 elements that I have to receive information regarding.
I can see it looks like part of the building has been blown away. We'll have to bank around to the other side so I can get a better view of it. The explosion went off around 9 a.m. and we could feel the explosion in the newsroom of Channel 9 at least 5 miles from downtown.
As the chopper goes around the side of the federal building,
wow.
Look at that shot.
Holy
it is
cow.
Absolutely incredible. The side of the federal building has been blown off. Jesse?
About a third of the building has been blown away. This is just devastating.
Let's look at certain similarities, because I'm going to compare this event to 9/11, to these fires, all over the world. And there's similarities I'm going to point out. Key pieces of evidence that tie together these events, okay? Look at the destruction of the building. Look at what's on the floor, look at the debris. Where is the building? Where did it go, right? It looked like it disappeared. There's not enough debris to represent that entire percentage of the building is missing. And then there's that white dust on the ground. Very similar to the way the buildings on 9/11, which I will show you in a little bit. First, notice the circular edges here with this, what looks like this melting tarp. Look how perfectly circular that is. A bomb doesn't create this kind of destruction. Pay attention to these cars right here and the way it is destroyed. Because similar images of cars from the California fires, Greece, Portugal fires will have the same type of destruction as far as cars. And then also you see the one on the right, cars flipped over on its back. What happened to this car? Look at the steel. It almost looks like it crumbled in on itself. See, there's another car just turned over right over here. And I'm sure in this big rubble, there's probably another one. And this is the roof. So every floor, every piece of material is missing. Just look at the way this building is. It is very similar to the buildings that were the World Trade Center. What happened to those buildings? It's the top view. I mean, these circles, these circular holes are very peculiar indeed. What could cause such a thing? It's very similar to the Oklahoma City building. Like the entire thing is like gutted out. There's no material left of it. Circular hole. And then notice this building over here, how it looks like it's melted, with some sort of high heat, like a microwave. If you put something in a microwave, it's gonna melt it to the point of destruction. See these holes in the ground again, holes. This is very curious. See how it cuts straight through. Which also is, when we look at the pictures of the fires, we find the same white smoke. Some of the Hutchinson effect samples with these holes, and we saw earlier images in chapter 2 when we looked at Petra, the destruction over there, how the mountain appeared to have melted, what looked like to be some high heat that was applied to it. This is one of John Hutchison's samples. Very similar hole that we see on top of those buildings, Oklahoma City building, and then see when I compare these holes to these beams, I think of these beams and then I look at these holes, So this is from the fire, this circular hole right here. See how just part of it was melted of this trash can? The energy is very clear cut, just like that building. It's very precise. So whatever this effect energy technology that was being used, obviously it's powerful enough to not only affect where the Twin Towers were, but also on the FDR Drive, which is about 3/4 of a mile away from the actual site. So this is the evidence of the cars on FDR Drive. What would cause this? Yeah, this is still a car park from 9/11. Like, what happened to these cars? Did the airplanes hit them too?
Their goal, that's their intentions.
Eric, can you be specific about when you met Rockefeller, how it happened in these discussions?
I met Rockefeller through a female attorney I knew who called me up one day and said, one of the Rockefellers would like to meet you. I had made a video called Mad as Hell, and he'd seen the video and wanted to meet me and knew I was running for governor of Nevada. So sure, I'd love to meet him. And I met him and I liked him, and he was a very, very smart man. And we used to talk and share ideas and thoughts. And he's the one who told me 11 months before 9/11 ever happened that there was going to be an event. Never told me what the event was going to be, but there was going to be an event. And out of that event, we were going to invade Afghanistan to run pipelines from the Caspian Sea. We were going to invade Iraq, you know, to take over the oil fields, establish a base in the Middle East, and make it all part of the New World Order. And we'd go after Chavez in Venezuela. And sure enough, later 9/11 happened. And I remember he was telling me how how you're gonna see soldiers looking in caves for people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these places. And there's gonna be this war on terror, of which there's no real enemy. And the whole thing is a giant hoax, you know, but it's a way for the government to take over the American people.
He told you it was going to be a hoax.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's no question. He says, there's going to be war on terror. And he's just laughing. There's no, who are we fighting? I mean, why do you think 9/11 happened and then nothing's happened since then? Do you think that our security is so great here that these people who pulled off 9/11, who were able to, can't knock down another plane? Come on, it's ridiculous. 9/11 was done by people in our own government and our own banking system to perpetuate the fear of the American people into subordinating themselves to anything the government wants them to do.
Up above at the top, there's WTC1's impact on the ground. And what's below that, that blue data, that was an earthquake that was in Midtown Manhattan that same year. It's approximately the same magnitude. And it was a 2.4 instead of a 2.3. But you notice the signals are very, very different. Notice the high frequency of in the blue signal.
Yes.
But notice that you first get the primary wave arriving, that little, it's kind of like snout leading up to the big wave. And then the secondary wave is that bigger one. But you can't see those same signals from when the towers hit. If the towers are slamming down into the bedrock, they should be ringing like a tuning fork.
Right.
Here's the signal for the Tower 1. It lasted 8 seconds. It takes 9.5 seconds to throw a bowling ball off the roof and have it hit the ground below. The building went away faster than it could have fallen. It didn't hit the ground, didn't slam to the ground. That's why there's no S and P waves. And that's what you would get if you lifted the building off the ground. You know, think of two people sleeping together in the same bed. One person gets up, the other person, in a conventional mattress, the other person feels the disturbance.
Right.
If you lift a 500,000-ton building off the ground, it's going to cause a surface disturbance.
Right.
That's all that was recorded. This is the King Dome. So here's a controlled demolition, and it produces a P wave and an S wave. So if we have Seattle King Dome, we're going to look at things relative to that. That made a 2.3 on the Richter scale when it was blown up by controlled demolition. And we have these two towers. Let's say for the Tower 2 is the first to go. So if we turn it to dust, all but the bottom 16 stories, and then drop a 16-story building to the ground, we record approximately the same seismic signal as what was recorded on 9/11. Just pretend this rest doesn't exist. And for Tower 2, if you turn it into dust above the 20th story and just drop a 20-story building to the ground, you get the seismic signal that was recorded. And for Building 7, it's all but the bottom 2.5 stories. Where's the rest of the building? That was Building 7 going away. You can't even see it on the chart. It made a 0.6 equivalency on the Richter scale, which is like a jackhammer. And it was 6 times the mass of the King Dome.
Not too long ago, my wife put something in the microwave, and instead of putting it for like 25 seconds or a minute 25, she put it for like 25 minutes. The thing burnt, right? And on the bottom of the glass that you put the food, the same marking was left there with the black round spot and then kind of like orange around the edges. This is microwave energy being used. We looked at these pictures from some of the ancient sites, the megalithic sites, and it's very evident. So whatever caused this on the car is appearing on this, carving of the snake, and also the foot of the statue and the head right here. And then look, this is a truck that completely rusted. How does that happen?
Later, when I found John Hutchison's work, wow, he can peel open extruded aluminum. That's not laminated, it's extruded. So we have these coins from the World Trade Center. People like to say they're melted together. I point out that zinc melts before copper does. It also boils before copper melts. So that would likely explode, but it's one of the lowest, zinc is one of the lowest melting point materials. So what gives? Why is this stuff stuck together? And this is the only surviving file cabinet from Ben & Jerry's ice cream store. Here's the piece of wood embedded in the aluminum from John Hutchison's work without elevated temperature. Same with these. WTC6 with these cylindrical holes in it. Well, here's John Hutchison's aluminum sample with cylindrical holes in it. It's as though there's a pencil line in space around which material at the same radius is dustified. And if you had a lot of those vertically here, you would end up with dustified cylindrical columns. But there's no way you could get a drill in there and turn it sideways. It's parallel to the surface. So here we have also the front of Bankers Trust. This was the only non-WTC building that was severely damaged. It wasn't destroyed that day. They actually repaired it. Once they repaired it, they started taking it apart. They got it down to this level where they had repaired it in deconstruction. There. When they got it down to that level, that's the area that had been repaired. It looks like it's been at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years. Extreme degradation. And it makes one wonder, was the building continuing to disintegrate, and that's why they had to take it down after they repaired it?
David Hansher, the photographer, one of the photographers for the New York Daily News, he reported being levitated, and he was carried a block.
As I hit the corner of Liberty Street, it was almost being picked up by a tornado. Almost being picked up
like a wave.
It was like being picked up.
That black cloud.
That black cloud had substance. It was like night, but it had a solid feel to it. It was like gravel, and just picked me up and tossed me about a block. At one second I was running, and the next second I was airborne. And I lost my glasses, I lost my cell phone, I lost my pager, but managed to hold on to both cameras.
But it threw you for a block?
I was back down at Ground Zero last week and walked the area where I have a pretty good recollection of where I was and where I wound up, and it was just under a city block.
We also have cars. Some of them nearby were also inverted, turned upside down. So again, these accounts, these events, and this evidence must be accounted for.
I mean, look at that. Look how thick that is. That's like snow. You know, that's the material of the entire building, everything that was turned into dust. That's why there was no people found, there were no furniture found, there was no... You heard Judy Wood in that last clip. One file cabinet was found. What happened to all the computers, the desks, the chairs, the tables?
They didn't burn up, nor did they slam to the ground, but turned into dust in midair. You see the steel falling in midair, trailing dust. It's not hitting anything as it's flying through the air. So why is it turning to powder in midair? It's not pulverization, it's not vaporization. I call it dustification. The building's turned to dust.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
You have a steel beam flying through the air, and it's dissolving as it flies through the air. It's turning into dust, and it's not hitting anything. The building was not smashed to bits. So that's why pulverizing doesn't describe it.
No explosions, no heat, no flames.
Vaporization implies high heat. You would have seen the whole building glowing. People would have been blinded by the light. It's very dense dust. It initially blocked out all of the sunlight, 100% of the sunlight, so it was pitch black. You come to the realization that these pieces of material are becoming dust. They're frothing up into dust as they fall. It turns to dust.
What happened on 9/11, I believe today it was not a controlled demolition, it was not nanothermite, and it certainly was not the pancake effect of two planes hitting a building.
There's a cluster of core columns that remains here. Watch what happens to them. They just faint. It's about 700 feet tall. If that thing tipped over, it would take out a few blocks worth of buildings. How's it going to go straight down? You got a 700-foot hole in the ground, dropping into? This video is of Building 7. Notice there's one face and one face only that has this lather pouring out of it. If that's smoke, Why is it one face only from ground to roof? That does not look like a fire pouring out a window.
Is basically not touched at all. A few little fires in it. I mean, it was weird. It was bizarre.
It blew out of one face of the building only, from bottom to top. These windows are broken. If it was smoke from a fire and it really needed to get out, why isn't it coming out these windows? If there's a traffic jam, why doesn't it take the path of least resistance? By 5:20 p.m., there wasn't enough mass left to slam to the ground. Here was these huge buildings that turned to dust in midair right in front of our faces on TV. Why did so few people see that? Because they were told to see a collapse, maybe?
I think all our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. You know, and I think that's what I sussed when I was 16 and 12 way down the line. But I expressed it differently all through my life. It's the same thing I'm expressing all the time. But now I can put it into that sentence that I think we're being run by maniacs for maniacal ends, you know. If anybody can put on paper what our government and the American government, etc., and the Russian, Chinese, what they are actually trying to do, you know, and what they think they're doing, I'd be very pleased to know what they think they're doing. I think they're all insane, you know, but I'm liable to be put away as insane for expressing that. You know, that's what's insane about it.
It takes a strong will to look at this stuff with a critical eye and to begin to ask the questions, because if we don't start at that level, we don't look at what the truth is, we don't look at the possibility that this could be something else that is going on, then how could we ever get to a solution? How could we ever stop it from happening unless we face it?
We need to collectively now engage in envisioning that new paradigm. How is it going to look? How is it going to feel? This is what today is about. This is what the entire movement that we've collectively been envisioning is about. A world beyond the time and money and fear. The world seems to be in a different place right now, and it's connected to the collective consciousness. You being here are the vital component. You are the protectorate. You are the living, sentient guardians. We've sat down with heads of state, with energy ministers, finance ministers, and pretty powerful people in the military-industrial complex. These are not people who want to co-opt the technology. These are people who want to protect us getting the technology into the market, because they also know that this here represents the end to war, disease, and poverty, one way or the other.
We are partnering with Sasha and Humanitad in developing the Chptr power technology. We've had 10 years experience in transmitting energy and information using longitudinal waves, and we have a background of dealing with some of the smartest guys on the planet. Chptr will be able to run houses, cars, boats, and planes. We're using nature as a basis for what we're doing here. So we have vortex technology involved and vibration. So spin and vibration are two constants in nature, and we're trying to not violate natural laws. Tesla's work in longitudinal waves is more important to us than what he did with alternating current, since that's the basis behind what we're doing. We're currently fine-tuning our prototype, then we'll convert everything over into a solid state, then we'll go to manufacturing and distribution after that.
Here's your typical street in your neighborhood, anywhere in the world. And as we bring these technologies out, the grid comes down. We don't need it anymore. When there's a snowstorm or hurricane or whatever, you don't lose power because you're not dependent on a grid that's going to be torn down by ice and snow and wind. You don't need wires. All these wires, the clutter of wires, you don't need them because every device will have its own source of energy. This could have been done decades ago. As we bring these out, all these freeways will be replaced. All the lines and power lines will go away. We can float above the surface. And in every city in the world, we're going to see this transformation, every village in the world. And then we have these cities, eventually where you're just floating, they're guided pathways, the ground is pristine, and then we're going out into space. So everyone remember where our destiny is. Our destiny is not just Earth, it's the whole cosmos. How is that going to be possible? The only way we're allowed to go outside our solar system is if we become a peaceful civilization. Otherwise, it's locked down. We are considered a planet that is dangerous and armed.
Technologies like this and countless others will never see the light of day without a radically new strategy. Dr. Greer is preparing to launch a multi-centered, state-of-the-art research and development lab that will develop zero-point energy technology, live streaming 24/7 for security and transparency. All research results, data, and plans would be released to the world open source, freely available to the public and the scientific community. This will require broad public support to make this a reality. With this strategy, zero-point energy is achievable, but it is only half of what has been suppressed.
We're getting very close to rediscovering some of the things that our ancient ancestors were up to. There's a laboratory right now in the Maldives that's been building prototypes using these technological principles, which are based on implosion rather than explosion. And the inspiration for this...
Tesla's ideas are part of it, I think you mentioned.
Tesla's ideas are very much a part of it.
I think the key thing is we're looking at technologies that are not the same as ours.
Yes.
And that's partly why archaeologists can't see them, because they're looking for us in the past, and they're not open to the possibility that there are whole other kinds of technology that could be used.
Right.
I always go back to the ancient Egyptian traditions that speak of priests chanting as these huge blocks were lifted into the air. Were they using some kind of sound effect that was able to manipulate matter? We know that sound can manipulate matter, as a matter of fact. People who are working on a whole alternative path of technology, and maybe that's a rediscovery of the kind of technologies that were used by a lost civilization.
Through this technology, they're able to move stones or cut stones or all the above?
All the above.
And even transport them?
This is diagramming all the frequencies of the elements and what their vibrational frequencies are and the numbers that measure those frequencies. And they're all the numbers we get from looking at these ancient traditions that recur over and over and over again. And in order to avoid the kinds of fate that befell Tesla and Reich, Robert Oppenheimer, Victor Schauberger, and so many others that were working in these fields, all kind of converging on this same insight. It's been conducted in secret. The laboratory has been, that they've been developing this is in the Maldives, so that it's been immune from government interference. And now I think it's about ready to go the next. And Mazda, the car manufacturer in Japan, is getting ready to do a $25 million testing of some of these prototypes that they believe they can retrofit internal combustion engines with. And there's over 100, they've developed over 100 patents on some of this stuff. And it's amazing.
And what would be the fuel?
Plasmoids. Plasmoids, as it says here, are donut or toroidal-shaped clusters of net protons or net electrons that once captured and placed into a toroidal orbit are capable of absorbing, storing, and releasing enormous amounts of energy.
Each one of us is very invested in the world as it is. We've built careers, relationships, and goals based on a world that doesn't include ETs and anti-gravity and free energy and healing devices and all this cool, abundant stuff. And so we need to understand and really know if we are ready for that investment to be disrupted. So one of the most powerful things that any of us can do is to look in our own hearts, imagine the world that could be, and ask ourselves, are we ready for that? If the answer is yes, then hold that readiness in your heart in all the excitement that it's due. If the answer is no, if there are some lingering doubts or fears or concerns, then go into that. Follow that. That's an important thread that you can follow back to something inside of you that needs attention. It's that obstacle that may be keeping us from living in this new world.